Start with the pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I do appreciate, Michael, you changing your personal agenda.
You're welcome.
I do appreciate it. Since the public comment period is over, and there will be, it is necessary to do quite a bit of work to get the final environmental impact statement into a form. I thought it would be good if the board met to share ideas of how they feel this process should go forward, concerns they may have on certain parts of the draft final, and how we want to be involved with our technical advisors, Labella, and perhaps we do need to plan a little further ahead, some working meetings as we go through this process. So I will outline the usual steps for finalizing the environmental impact statement. The project's technical advisors generally take the lead in doing the first draft of the final. They collect all the comments from the public comment period and the public hearings and address those concerns, and then it's passed to our technical consultant, Labella, to go over and have the project sponsors, technical people, flesh out any concerns they have. This final document is a board document, and so I really want to know how the board wants to be involved in this final phase, and
do you have any input from Labella in terms of if they have any feelings about how they would like us to be involved in it, if any? And then do you have any feedback from them on that? I know last time.
well, they'll meet with us personally.
When would that occur?
Well, that would be the board's
Our
decision.
choice.
Yeah, our choice,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
At a board meeting?
Well, it would be, I believe, better for everyone if it were a special meeting.
Yeah, it would be a
Because it
special
would be a
meeting that was
working
well-
meeting.
Yeah,
It would
working
be a
meeting,
working
yeah.
meeting. There is just too much that has to be done at the monthly meeting. It
Yeah, I
just,
mean, you have to separate the two.
Yeah.
To me, you simply have to. I can't imagine personally.
The question really that was coming up in my mind was that at what point would Labella be functionally ready for, benefiting from, interested in, willing to accept, or whatever terminology, our input into the process. So they could get something back from Black Oak's advisors and have, there's a lot of questions out there and there's a lot of information that got submitted, obviously. That will go to Black Oak. Black Oak will have responses. Then that goes to Labella, is what you're saying, okay. So the question is, would the Bella want us to be part of that process when they first get those responses? Would they rather get to look at the responses themselves for a while from Black Oak and say, okay, this one's easy, this one, who knows? Would they rather wait until they've done their whole response thing and then have us come in and look at their responses to Black Oak's responses and see how we feel about it? You know, where in the process do we fit best? And I'm wondering if maybe they would want some input into that, not that we couldn't decide to inject ourselves into the process where we thought was appropriate, but it just seems like since they've done this before, maybe they would have a better sense of what they would like and how we could be most beneficial.
It's the board's choice.
Well,
When-
it is our
When you-
choice, but
You put out
When?
several ideas for choices,
We can start right
if I'm
tonight.
hearing you right.
what I'm saying is that Labella being a primary ingredient of this process, we've hired them to be part of our response team, basically. I would want to integrate with them as part of our response team in the sense of knowing when they would like, you know, maybe they'd like a week to look at Black Oak's responses first, and then have us also look at Black Oak's responses first, and then have each of us come in with our notes and say, okay, let's compare notes with how we might want to respond to these responses from Black Oak. Or do they want to come in and read them all together and say, okay, that's interesting, that's interesting. It seems to me that it might be beneficial for them to have at least a few days to look at what's there, and for us to have a few days to look at what's there, for us to, all of us, them and us, to have an opportunity to think about, is that good, is it bad, is it complete, is it incomplete, you know, what is it? And then to go and talk with them perhaps before they wrote up what they're gonna write up, and say, okay, here's what we think about this, what do you think about this, and then we can compare some notes and kind of go from there.
Well, I'm not a fan of hit responses, so I think what you're talking about is more where I'm thinking, even though I have different opinions about things.
Right.
I think if we've hired them as our advisors or on this project,
Right.
that they should have an opportunity to digest the concerns, questions,
bit
whatever.
first,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, you know, it doesn't make any sense
Yeah.
to,
And that's why I was wondering if we maybe should bring them into the loop and ask them if it would be beneficial for them to have a little bit of digesting time before we started, or maybe they would want us to be in, maybe they would want some of us to be in a meeting where they talk about it. I don't know what their process is.
No, I
Do they
don't
give
know.
everything to one person and
Yes.
say, okay, answer
Yes.
this? And they don't sit and talk about it in a meeting and do that with a lot of different people, so.
No.
So
We have
maybe-
one person, one employee of Labella's
Right.
that's assigned to our environmental impact
Yes,
statement.
Catherine.
Kathy Spencer. Catherine Spencer.
So with that in mind, if it was me, I probably would want to have a conversation with Kathy Spencer and ask her where we fit best in the project, in the process, and try and come to a good understanding of where the board should input to be the most benefit to them and to be the most benefit to what the board wants to create. And so asking Kathy, you know, where do you think we belong in this process would be a great start to it. And I don't know how soon that's likely to be, whether Black Oak will have its responses next week or a month from now, or how long it'll take them, but I assume nobody's heard from them so far. I know there's a lot of information or a lot of letters that got sent to them, so. But maybe they're, you know, a lot of them were very similar too, so maybe,
you know, I don't know either, but I would imagine that if I were Black Oak, I would be, you know, grouping the letters into compartments or file
Exactly.
folders as to what
Right.
the concerns were, and then starting to
Exactly.
look at them.
Yeah.
But I
That
don't
makes
know how
sense.
that works, so.
How long does Labella need to, or I should say Kathy, need to digest all of the responses? And there are quite a few of them, and some
Yeah.
of them are quite lengthy.
Yeah.
How
Right.
long does she need?
well, that would be one of the questions that someone would ask her, and to see, you know, where, and that way, anybody from the board that is looking to have input into the process could also know when they should be prepared to have their level of input
Right.
from, once we get the information back from Black Oak, you know. Does Kathy need 2 weeks to even get an initial idea of it? Or is she ready to start writing responses the next day, or, you know, what's going on with her? For myself, I would love to be involved with the process and listen in and have some comments to make if they're appropriate, whatever. I don't know what we're allowed to do in relation to the town board, more than 2 members meeting at a time. You know,
Right.
whether we would want to do it as the whole board meets with Labella, or we would want to have some representatives of the board meet with Kathy and talk about it from there, and then somehow bring in the whole board together as a whole at some point. But it depends on how many people on the board, I think, want to be part of the process and want to be there directly.
Well, I would like to be
Yeah.
part of the process, but I would like to do it according, as they say, according to Hoyle, so there's no question that we follow the appropriate process.
Right.
So I wanna know what the process would be, and I guess we find out, our lawyer would tell us, or Labella,
No,
or
no.
Frank Pavia
no.
would tell us.
They're not going to tell us.
What?
They're not gonna tell us. How many times to meet,
Oh,
who's gonna initiate the meeting.
So we can talk to
That's
Kathy.
what this meeting is about.
That's fine, I think that's
Okay,
great.
all right.
Yeah.
Should we just have like an initial meeting with her, even like a short part of next week's meeting, just to touch base with her on what she needs?
what her expectations would be
Yeah.
if we wanted to get more involved.
Yeah, we wouldn't need a special meeting for that, just to touch base with her, and then we
Right.
can set up a special meeting
Agenda
after that
item.
to do that, yeah.
Can we do that, Ann?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is she local?
No,
Where is she?
well, Rochester.
Rochester.
I mean, I guess it's your definition of local.
Well, we can Skype her or however we
Oh,
want to do that.
oh.
She works in the Rochester office of Labella.
So she doesn't have to
I
come
believe
down.
it's in Victor, but maybe it's Rochester.
Victor, this side of?
This side, yeah.
Yes, it's
Closer.
this side.
Half an hour closer.
Yeah, so it's an hour. and
Half a mile
maybe.
closer.
Yeah, hour and a half.
Right.
It's up there, so.
It's
give
an
it-
hour and a half.
Yeah,
If we had the ability to really Skype someone, we could do it that way, but
yeah.
we're in ground zero of no reception.
Well.
No,
we
our
have that,
technical
and we
guys
have-
gotten
and we have
over that
internet
hump.
connection,
Oh,
so
good.
We don't
Didn't
need the
know
cell.
that. I
we-
didn't know that.
We don't have cell connection, but we do have internet, and we have a monitor.
That's news to me,
So-
that's fantastic.
So
Right.
at least give her the option if she wants to be here physically, or if we want, if she can Skype.
Okay. So does anybody at this point have an idea of their concerns? You do have the draft of the final. So you do have,
Will you have the draft?
The draft of the final supplemental.
Final
environmental
supplemental,
text.
Okay.
Oh, the draft.
the draft.
The draft
draft.
supplemental.
Draft supplemental,
Draft,
okay,
supplemental,
okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
The draft of the final supplemental, or something,
Something.
I don't know.
The draft.
Of the
Okay.
of the
Okay, whatever it's
supplemental.
called.
Right. I
which
have
was
lots of
prepared by
ideas.
the
The draft
sponsor.
final, the draft supplemental.
Right.
There was a lot of really great information that came in, that Alice sent out to us on the website. It was really interesting stuff, lots of things going on. I don't know, I sent some things in, probably other people did, maybe from the board as well. I certainly have some real concerns, and the more I look into this, the more real and the more concerned my concerns are, so.
So what are they?
Um,
Let's cut to the chase. I'm really interested in hearing what board members' concerns are, because I've been involved in
I'm
this. on a
really,
different level.
really happy to talk about them,
Good.
I promise you. One of the biggest issues, and this bothered me all along, I guess, once I started to look into it, was that the information coming from Black Oak was so selective, that they were very, very careful to only include things that were supportive of their case. And to some degree, at least when they realized it, they didn't include anything that wasn't supportive of their case. Things having to do particularly with noise level, particularly with infrasound levels, low frequency sound levels, and just regular, whatever the A-level sound levels are, seem to be glossed over always. And the unwillingness of the people from Black Oak to even consider any kind of mitigation, any kind of changes, any kind of way for any of the residents that are gonna live nearby and have to live with this, basically, was really upsetting to me, the fact that they were unwilling to change any of their thoughts, any of their ideas, and any of their actual, I mean, once the finding statement was approved, all the communications that I've had with the people from Black Oak, and it's mostly from Peter Bardeglio, has been like, we're done with our approvals. You don't have anything to say to us anymore. We don't want to change anything. We're not willing to change anything. As far as we're concerned, all the legal buttons are on our side. You have no legal rights anymore other than to give us a permit when the time comes and it's all said and done. First of all, just to deal with that I don't think is true at all. And after talking with Guy Crow and after talking with another lady who is an environmental lawyer, who is also the head of the Westchester County Land Trust, who was also the Armonk town supervisor for a number of years, who made it very clear to me that towns, if the right is given to the town to choose something, to decide something, the towns have that right, and it's pretty much inviolable by the courts. Usually the courts will uphold any decision that a town makes in terms of their own regulatory process, as long as they have reason to back it up, as long as they can come up with something that backs it up for themselves. So what she said to me was that as far as Black Oak suing us for not giving them a permit based on all the information and all the regulatory decisions they made so far, she doesn't think there's any issues with that at all. She feels like that lawsuit wouldn't even go forward, that it would be not something that Black Oak would win. When I look at the information, if I look at things like, and this is from 2012, health impacts of noise and vibration. There is limited epidemiological evidence suggesting an association between exposure to wind turbines and annoyance. There is insufficient evidence to determine whether there's an association between noise and annoyance dependent from the effects of seeing a wind turbine and vice versa.
Where's that information from, Mike?
I'll tell you in a minute, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Page 12. There were 3 studies that said that low frequency, there were studies done about low frequency and infrasound levels as a possible problem. 3 studies said no, 4 studies said yes. Black Oak cited one of the studies that said no, and none of the studies that said yes. And in their citing of the study that said no, it's not a problem at all, they said that this was proven evidence, that therefore there is no possibility that infrasound and low frequency sounds are an issue. So they took the information that they had, completely ignored the fact that 4 of the studies said there is a problem, took the one study that said that there wasn't a problem and said that that was the only truth, was that one study that said that there wasn't a problem. So to me, it's really disingenuous to somebody to do that. I really feel like I almost feel like they're lying to us. I'm not going to say that they're lying to us, but either somebody didn't do a very good job of looking at their own information, or they felt like it was in their best interest to only present the information that was appropriate to their cause, and to not say anything about the information that wasn't appropriate to the cause, which is definitely something that a big business would do or a corporation would do. It's not something that we would expect from a friendly neighborhood wind farm, and it's not something you would expect to have happen with people that are living in your own town that are talking about issues that are going to affect their neighbors. I could see a big company coming in and saying, we're only going to sell it this way, and if everybody believes us, that's great. But to deny even including the evidence that says, well, maybe it's true, but maybe it's not true too, I think is really disingenuous of them to do. Let me go on to another page. main results of this study, this is a Swedish study that was done, the main results of this study was that there was a significant association between noise level and annoyance. It is not implausible that those who were annoyed by the turbines were more inclined to return the questionnaire. Many times in the statements that Black Oak made, they talked about noise just being annoying and being an annoyance to people, and that was the only level that there was a problem. There was no health problems that were proven. And I think probably to a great degree that's probably true. They haven't really done studies to prove that there are health issues to date. Page 34. Summary of sleep data. In summary, sleep is a complex biological state important for health and well-being across a wide range of physiologic functions. To date, no study has adequately examined the influence of wind turbines and their effects on sleep. So, yeah, well, to date, nobody studied that, that's true, and this was in 2012. But to say that there's no evidence is wrong. There is some evidence. There just isn't the preponderance of evidence on the side that, yes, there is certainly health issues involved with this. Page 28 and 29. The panel concludes that there is limited evidence suggesting an association between noise from wind turbines and sleep disruption, and further study would quantify precise sound levels from wind turbines that disrupt sleep. There is evidence that levels of audible noise below levels that cause hearing loss can have a variety of health effects or indicators. Detail about the evidence for such health effects have been well summarized in a World Health Organization report that came to several relevant conclusions. WHO 2009. First, there is sufficient evidence for biological effects of noise during sleep, increase in heart rate, arousals, sleep stage changes and awakening. Second, there is limited evidence that noise at night causes hormone level changes and clinical conditions such as cardiovascular illness, depression, and other mental illnesses. What the WHO report also details is observable noise threshold levels for these potential effects. For such health effects, where data are sufficient to estimate a threshold level, the level is never below 40 decibels as a yearly average for noise outside ambient noise at night. And these estimates take into account sleeping with windows slightly open. So basically what they're saying is that they haven't done enough studies yet to know, but that certainly anything above 40 decibels can have a significant effect on people's sleep and all these other problems that come along with sleep issues. One more quick thing I would read. The Ministry of the Environment regulates wind turbines in Ontario, Canada. A new regulation for renewable energy projects came into effect on September 24, 2009. The requirements include minimum setbacks and community consultations. Setbacks. Provincial setbacks were established to protect Ontarians from potential health and safety hazards of wind turbines, including noise and structural hazards. The minimum setback for a wind turbine is 550 meters from a receptor. That's 1,500 feet, about?
What was the
550 meters? Somewhere in the 1,500 feet range, okay, which is larger than ours basic one. The setbacks rise with the number of turbines and the sound level rating of the selected turbines. For example, a wind project with 5 turbines, each with a sound power level of 107 decibels, must have its turbine set back at a minimum 950 meters from the nearest receptor. So these are 2 studies. One of them is the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, done in January 2012. The other is done by the Canadian Ministry of Health in 2009. These studies came from Black Oak Wind Farm environmental impact statement. They were part of their environmental impact statement.
That's what I understood,
Yeah.
your opening
So,
statement.
so to say, as they do in their conclusions, there is nothing to show that there is any effect of noise and infrasound and low levels. It's just wrong. I mean, it's just plain wrong for them to say that based on the information that they're actually including in their own proposals. I did want to say one other quick thing, and this is, I hope you'll indulge me a little bit because this was something that really got to me. So we don't really know what noise levels do. There's not really enough studies. Nobody's really funding them. The people that do studies mostly are funded by people that are in the wind business, in the business of making it happen somewhere or other. I haven't seen many studies done, and maybe other people know that there are, but I haven't seen many studies done by people that are just on the other side saying this noise is hurting us. And it would take a lot of money to do these studies to do that. There is a lot of anecdotal evidence, and there is a lot of evidence saying we don't have enough evidence yet, or it's limited evidence, or we're not there yet. But this is another issue. This is about lead in paint. Okay? They used to put lead in paint, and the reason why was it made it last a lot longer, and it looked shiny, and there were lots of reasons for it. It was a good thing. So in 1887 was the first study done in the United States that diagnosed that there was a possibility of children being poisoned by lead in their bloodstream. In 1904, there was a study done in Europe that linked lead additives in paint to poisoning in children. In 1909, France, Belgium, and Austria became the first European countries to ban the use of any lead in paint anywhere in the country. In 1922, the League of Nations passed a resolution saying all countries that were part of the League of Nations should stop adding lead to their paint, in any of the paint that they produced.
That wasn't the U.S.
In 1943,
I'm waiting.
the U.S. issued a report saying lead in paint was dangerous to children. In 1971, lead paint began to be phased out in the United States. In 1979, there was a federal law that outlawed lead additives in paint. In 1980, there was a study done of urban African American children that said that 35% of all urban African American children had lead levels in their bloodstream that were considered to be unsafe. In 2010, the federal government developed protocols for contractors stripping lead paint from houses to protect the workers and the neighbors and residents. Before that, they just scraped the lead off the houses. It went into the next door neighbor's yard, it went into the air, it went into the kids' sandbox, it went whatever they wanted to. And in 2015 and 2016, the Ithaca City School District discovered that they've been poisoning the children in their schools for the last however many years with lead in their pipes.
May I say something?
There's not a direct correlation between lead and what's going on here, but to me, to say that I can ignore this evidence, even this lack of complete evidence, and say that there's not going to be any harm to these people, I just can't do it. I can't do it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay, I didn't interrupt you, but the lead thing had got me going, because our agency that I work for, in I think it was probably 2002, our energy services program started dealing with lead paint when they did weatherization. I mean, that was one of the first things next to the energy use
Right.
that they assessed. If there was lead paint, we got extra funding to remove that.
Right.
And of course, we run Head Start and everything else, so it's very much in the forefront. The other thing that he mentioned was, or he talked about, was noise. And before I moved to this county, I spent most of my life either on the ocean, right next to it, or next to a constantly running stream. There was noise that came and went depending on the rain, and I'm afraid no studies were done about that, but I never had trouble sleeping. So I really have a hard time, having been to several wind farms and been in a wind turbine that was turning. You know, there are not, to me, conclusive studies about that sound.
I think you're right.
And
there
I
are
don't
not
think that
conclusive
I
studies.
would say, can put to a project that would bring us green energy to this community, I just can't.
That's fine. And
But
I respect your right
Yeah,
to
I
that
mean-
position, and I think
Yeah,
we
I
all are
mean-
gonna have our own positions. I'm
I
just,
mean, the ocean is a variable, and having lived on it, literally lived right next to it, where waves are coming in and out, and hurricanes and
Right.
whatever. It never really upset any of my family members that I know of.
one interesting aspect about living on the
And
ocean.
I've tried, actually, excuse me, Mike, I tried to research that before this meeting, but I didn't have time.
One interesting aspect about living on the ocean is that that property will probably never lose its value unless the ocean goes up and covers it
No.
someday.
It
which
might.
It probably will never lose its value and,
No.
and probably will increase in value.
But living on an active stream, as I did for probably the second 15 years of my life, an active mill stream that was constantly running was right outside my bedroom window. It never, it was like I miss
Right.
it. And maybe I need to get a recording.
I would bet that anybody who lives within 2,000, 3,000 feet of these wind turbines, if they go into place and we look at them trying to sell their property for anywhere near its value, 2 years down the road, it's not likely that they'll be able to do that anywhere near close.
Well,
to
it'd be an interesting discussion, because I certainly know the properties that I lived at.
Definitely
I've
on the ocean and by the
documented,
stream.
no, not the ocean, the other one, the mill stream,
The-
everything.
the mill stream, too,
It's
yeah.
way up there than what it never had a problem selling, so
Yeah.
I just have a problem with that kind of low decibel noise that you may have in your background. I mean, you think about the, things you get for babies that help them sleep, white noise.
So let me ask you this then. Do you feel that if that's the case, and if it didn't bother you, is it possible that some people would have trouble living close to the ocean, possibly, maybe
Possibly,
one out of
of
every 10
course.
person?
You know,
So let's
everybody's
say-
different.
Let's say
Everybody's
there's
different.
1 in 10 persons who have trouble living by the ocean and 1 in 10 persons who have trouble living by a wind turbine. Do we have, as a board representing the people in this town, any obligation to make sure that they are not both health-wise and financially damaged by the fact that those wind turbines moved into their backyard, let's say?
Well, I think we could look at, if there's a huge financial damage, we could look at that, but I also don't feel it's like a huge issue. Supposing Milliken Station suddenly was planted up there, do you think that would be a huge damage?
Not, I
mean,
think, it would- yes, I
feel-
think it would definitely be a huge damage. The only issue is that the Milliken Station is already there. So the people that bought houses near Milliken Station chose to live there and chose to put their time and their money into that. Whereas these people have lived here for decades, sometimes longer than that. Families have been there for centuries. And they're just saying that we may not be able to live here, but we may not be able to move. If the property that we own has half or a quarter of the value that it has now once those wind turbines are in place,
Well, I think that's
what
another
can we possibly
discussion.
do?
I think that's another issue to take up with Black Oak.
Well, that's in the information that was given to Black Oak. So
So I don't know what they're considering, if anything. I really
a
don't.
careful reading of setback and noise information in regards to wind generators shows the effects on close neighbors to the generators vary greatly. In all the information supplied in their filings, Black Oak is careful to present that most in keeping with their own needs. A close reading of their own submittals, particularly Appendix V of the draft EIS, which is what I read
Yeah.
before, shows that most of the setback distances and noise standards chosen were arbitrary, as were those of the Enfield wind law, and not necessarily in keeping with best practice of even 5 or 6 years ago, to say nothing of today's standards, which tend to be much stricter. There's no question that noise, exacerbated by proximity to wind generators, is an issue. Whether it has been legally proven to date to be a health issue, or simply an annoyance, as Black Oak states, is really beside the point. Living with something that annoys you 24 hours a day for the rest of your life, or waiting for it to start happening, knowing it will, perhaps even worse, cannot help but quickly become a health issue. It is likely that not everyone living in proximity to a generator will be adversely affected, and just as likely that some will be. Black Oak needs to take this into account now in this draft supplemental environment impact statement and work with the town of Enfield to find a way to ensure that the latter group, the people that are affected, will have a way to move away from this area of proximity and not suffer financial loss in doing so. To say that Black Oak cannot afford to do this is not immediately relevant, as we don't even know what the cost would be. When the statements made by Black Oak, saying studies show no loss of real estate value to houses close to wind farms, are considered, then there should be very little cost involved. To answer that this is an economic issue, therefore not covered in this process, is also irrelevant, as it is a health issue with economic consequences. To argue that the wind law does not require this level of compliance, I would say that Article 3, Section 3 of our wind law allows for the denial of a permit based on the town board's consideration of the seeker review process in its entirety. This section states that upon completion of the review process, the board shall make its decision with accompanying reasons for approval or denial.
Who wrote that?
Me.
I agree with that
So,
strongly.
What?
I agree with that pretty strongly.
so I think it's a part of it. I think it's a separate issue, but in the same way, it's actually a part of the whole issue. What
So
happens?
one of your concerns is property values.
I wouldn't put it as that. One of,
Because-
Because of
That's
that,
what it is.
if I can interrupt, that, if I go back to when this whole thing started in 2007, 2008, there were people here, people at the meetings downstairs that I haven't seen since, who were worried about their property values, and they haven't appeared since, I assume. I mean, two even came with their real estate agents, and I don't know what happened to them, if they sold their property or not, but I understood then their concerns, but they apparently are not appearing again, so I didn't research property
Most-
sales.
most of these folks don't want to move.
I'm sure, I don't wanna move either,
Yeah.
so I get it. But I would still have a turbine in my backyard, so I'm not part of that group, so, but I understand where they were coming from at the time, and they had, real estate, two of them had real estate agents with them, as I remember. It was quite a while ago, so.
Which is why I'm saying to Ann that it's not really property values I'm concerned of. What
Well, if
I'm
you look at,
concerned
you
with-
look at the county assesses property at 100%. So if somebody sells a property that is assessed for 125,000 and they can only get 100, you're saying perhaps, or we're saying perhaps Black Oak should come up with the extra.
I'm saying from the anecdotal evidence that I've seen, there's a good possibility that people will be lucky to recoup half of what's considered to be the appraised value of the property if they were to try and sell
Well,
the situation.
I guess I need to go back to that period of time and see what properties were sold up there during that period of time and what they went for. Because I don't feel that was that great a loss, but that's something I haven't had time to do, and I will do.
And we won't know really until the wind farm is actually in place and people want to try and sell their property.
Right.
Then we'll actually know. But at that point, it'll be too late for the folks that want to sell their property and can't, which is why I feel that now is the time to consider this issue. And the reason that I say it's not really a property value issue so much, it's really a can I continue to live here issue. And if I can't continue to live here, will I have to just leave my house and hope that someday I'll be able to sell it for 25, 50 cents on the dollar, and then go somewhere else and hope that I even have enough money to buy another property somewhere else, or maybe just have to go live in rental housing the rest of my life because I can't get enough money.
That's not, to me, that's a horrible idea.
Not a horrible idea, but if you raise your family and you have little kids and they've got a swing set in the backyard and you've got some
No, I think
dogs
it's
that
a
run
horrible
outside and play.
idea for someone to feel so threatened, or they feel so ill from the whole thing that they have to leave. Then we need to consider it as a board.
Right, it's just that if we don't consider it now, we don't really have,
Well, this is,
So
the
you-
time is now.
we don't
So
have any
you
rights
don't
later.
want to consider it property values. So what do you
I'm
want
saying
to?
it's more than property value. I'm saying it's the need to be able to leave the proximity,
stay.
to leave the proximity of the wind farm and be able to not lose drastically financially in doing so. Does that make sense? I don't know if
I
can-
don't see any difference between loss of property values.
Well,
Well, I can see, there's a difference between not wanting to leave your property because you love it, you lived there for years, you like where you live, and you feel that the coming of a wind turbine near you is going to threaten you and your family's health or whatever, aesthetically, whatever issue or issues combined. However, we come to the point of, this whole thing of, are we gonna go ahead with green energy, or are we gonna not, because people that live there, it threatens them in some way or another.
Right, but what I'm actually talking about is once the wind generators are in place and there is a definite, not just a threat, but there is a definite issue that they can't live there anymore.
So your concern is making some people in this town make the choice of moving.
Some people may need to make that choice.
And I think, excuse me if I interrupt again.
Go ahead, sorry.
But no, I think some people made that choice, and I may have my dates wrong, but when we first started out as a planning board, I think some people that came to those meetings that were very vocal, and we listened to them, and so on, and we drafted a law, and it went to the town, and that was the end of it. But I think some of them moved, because they were so threatened by it.
Right.
And, that's their choice.
Right.
I mean, if I didn't like the sound of water running over a dam or in the ocean, and I know there probably are people that hate that, they're threatened by it because they're worried that the sea's gonna rise up or whatever, but, by the same token, I wouldn't like to live on the cuspice of Logan Airport.
Right.
So, it's a choice, and
It's a choice, but it
but
they
also
already live
is
there.
an economic choice, and a holistic choice of it's where my family is, I have my house here, and so on. It's
Right,
difficult.
so would we as a board, for instance, let any other kind of nuisance corporate entity locate anywhere else in the town if it was going to force people out? I mean, where do we start or stop as a board and say, well, we will protect the people that live in this
There are
town?
no regulations except state regulations.
Yeah, for
About-
us.
Enfield has
about-
very few.
Yeah,
right now.
that's, but we also have to realize that.
And corporations, there are not many rules except state rules.
Right,
Except for the one that we passed a couple of years ago that said we wouldn't allow hydrofracking in the town of Enfield.
That was
you,
the
God.
second land use we
Right,
passed.
so we do have some, and we did
We-
take it into
we have
consideration.
to.
and the wind
We
farm
do
was
have-
cited
and
cited
that's-
where it was, because that's where the wind blew. I mean, there was a whole period of studies on that for years,
Right.
so it's not like we could just move it somewhere else.
It's not like they can just move somewhere else. The question is, do they have to do it there at all?
No, that's where I get off the train. I think it's time to do it.
Do you know that there are other alternative wind technologies that are being developed that don't require wind generators with blades on them?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that there are solar technologies that could very well produce the same amount of energy
Well,
in a similar situation?
well,
Um,
well.
Do you know that there are other places throughout?
The articles aren't really
There
showing
are other
that.
places throughout the state that if you were to place the wind generators in these other places, they actually would have 30% capacity rather than the only 10% capacity that they'll have on this hill in Enfield.
I would need to see those, or have someone forward them to me, because I've done a lot of research, I haven't seen that.
Well, this-
I
yeah.
haven't looked at solar, because I know solar is certainly a viable energy producer, but I don't really care for
Right.
the way it's sometimes applied.
Would you want to see the information that says if you put the wind generators near water, near an open water, they'll produce 30% of capacity rather
Well,
than
we know, I mean,
10%
I know that
capacity?
from what they tried to do off Cape Cod.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's too bad that failed.
Well, why did it fail?
Because of
People
public
didn't want their,
outcry.
they just didn't want their view
And
ruined.
you know what was different about those people?
Rich,
They had a whole lot of money.
they're rich.
Yep.
So I'm totally aware of that.
Yeah.
And nobody here, I don't think in this room is rich. I can't speak for
I don't know that any of us are.
I'm
maybe, but-
sorry if I misstated, but nobody
Yeah.
is, and I
Yeah.
totally get that. But, I come from a place where I don't find them ugly.
I think we all have to make sacrifices to make this world work better, and it's gonna have problems. I just, as a town board member, as the role that's been given me, I can't say that these 80 to 100 families that live in these residences have to sacrifice their lives and their lifestyles to this commercial project that's coming into them. And I can't do that at this point.
Okay.
Not without significant mitigation on the part of the wind farm, which they have shown no interest at all in doing at this point.
Well,
I don't
what
feel
would
it.
you propose?
I would propose, at the very least, that they find a way to deal with the future situation where some people may have to leave their houses, won't be able to live there, and that they can find a way to get out of their houses, get out of their property, and not lose financially from it. And just like that law that I gave you from the town of Hammond or wherever it was, which was one model,
Right.
one example.
Right.
And there's lots of different ways you could
Do
think about it.
you think it was passed?
I don't know if it was passed. It may have been put in place to keep wind farms from happening. That's my
Right.
understanding.
Well,
New York?
Yeah.
that is the, what happened. Whether the threatening of the passing was enough or whether they actually passed it, I
In
haven't.
towns all over central and upstate New York are passing laws that make it impossible for wind farms to come into their towns and counties, just for the very reason that they're concerned about the health of the people that live in their counties.
But
and
we
their
aren't
towns.
equal to those people because we do have a wind farm law.
We do
we-
have,
we
well, they had
have
the law
it.
too. Their law was just so restricted that it didn't allow the wind generators to be there.
Yes,
Our
But-
law wasn't that restrictive.
right, right. But that is the law we have.
It is the law we have, right. It doesn't, however, restrict us or stop us from saying that we won't approve the wind farm permit to be built.
Well, we'll certainly have to have at least one session with our lawyer
Yeah,
about
I
that.
would think so.
Well, that's why I asked him about that, and I asked him specifically that, do we have any say in the existing law? And he said, yes.
Yes, you have some.
Article 3, Section 3 gives you some say. If you have a reason to not have the wind farm there, and it's based on the health and safety of the people that live in your town, and you can verify that in some way, then you have a reason to deny the wind farm. That's what Guy told me.
So are you starting to do this verification?
Verification of
Your health and...
reasons, health and safety issues? No, I actually was hoping, against hope, that the wind farm would actually have a willingness to come to the table and sit down and say, you're right, there really are some possible issues here. There really are some health issues. There really are going to be noise standards that are not going to be kept up with. What can we do to make this work for you people? But that hasn't been forthcoming. And I don't expect it to be.
I
And
don't
so
agree. I
You
would
as a
hope-
board member don't want to put forth anything.
Put forth verification. I would be happy to write up a whole legal brief. This lady in Westchester County would be happy to help me. She's an environmental lawyer. Was a town supervisor for a long time. When I talked to her on the phone last week, she said, tell me what you need. We'll go to Article 78, we'll do this, we'll do permissive referendums if they're appropriate. I'll tell you all the laws that you have to do, and I'll tell you how to do this proposal, and we'll write it up. And that's fine with me. If that's, but it may well be that we'll vote on everything and the board will be 3-2 and there won't be any changes anyways, and there won't be any room for this. I'm just saying my part, my side, and this is what I think. And if the board decides that they feel like we are wanting to hold Black Oak's feet to the fire, so to speak, although I don't like that analogy very well. But if we're willing to say to them, we need you to do this in order for us to be able to vote approval for you, that may be what would make them say, okay, we'll do it. Peter Badegulo was very clear, the first meeting he came to, he said, we will not do anything that we are not forced to do because we are a corporation, and that's not how corporations work. We don't change our path. We don't go around things in the pathway just because somebody says go around. We're a corporation and we're legally required to do what is best for our shareholders in our corporation. If you make us change, then we'll have to change. If you make some kind of a legal argument that says you can't do this and legally here's why, we will make the choice to either change or we'll fight you on the legal argument and we'll say that we're right. Every time I've written letters back to Peter Bardeglio, and I've written a number of letters and gotten a number of responses to him, he basically says, we don't really care what you think. We have the legal rights on our side and we are going to continue and proceed on our way. just as we have been in the past, and not change.
Are you willing to share those letters with the rest of us?
I'm happy to, yes.
I'm
They're-
sure, that's
yeah,
a
they're
stupid
not-
question.
Peter's not being, I mean,
Okay,
this is
I would
not-
like to, because I have,
Yeah.
I have tried to get hold of him and haven't.
I will print
And I
them
would,
off
I would
and send them to
really,
you and whatever.
yeah,
that's
you have my
fine.
email, I'll make sure you have it.
But some of it was in the conversations at the committee meeting, at the wind farm committee, and the first time he came to the committee meeting.
And I've stayed away from that because of my previous involvement with the planning board as a co-chair. Way back when, I just thought it would be disingenuous somehow. Maybe it wouldn't have been. I don't know, but I'd like to hear,
I
you know,
got
what
that.
Michael and Henry have to say.
I'm not-
I
I'm
got,
not-
I mean, I get the sense, you know, from that meeting, that was my sense coming away from that too.
It's not a fault to Peter. He's the head of this
Speaking- yeah,
corporation.
right, but-
That's really all he can say. He can't say, oh gee, I think you guys are nice. I think I'll just make a deal with you right now. He can't do that. He
However,
represents.
I do not think that we can make any restriction that you want in this final
I
stage.
agree, very much so, yes.
Oh,
I
you
think
would
we can
agree with
only
that.
restrict in the ways that we feel are appropriate to protect the health and safety of the
Wow.
residents of the town of Enfield.
Do you wanna hear our other concerns?
Yes,
Yeah,
I,
please shut up for a while. Let
yes.
you guys go.
No,
I want to move on to
Um,
other board members' concerns.
You know, I share a lot of Mike's concerns, so I'm not gonna,
Noise levels, infrasounds, unwillingness of project to change or modify anything.
yeah, I share those concerns, that's my sense of that. So I'm not gonna repeat what was just said in the
Thanks.
interest of time.
Thanks.
I have some additional comments that, you know, been bugging me in addition to what Mike has concerns for. One is our wind law. And this is, you know, referenced quite often in the DEIS, DSCS, and other places. And we have a defective wind law. We all know this. There's a defective wind law. It's basically almost like not having a wind law at all, given the noise restrictions and the setbacks. They're essentially meaningless. We need to fix that. I'm concerned, you know, through some of the mitigations that, you know, reading through some of this, there's not really any mitigation. Just saying, well, the effects will be minimized to the maximum extent possible. You see that quite often in the documents, but I really don't see any. And in some places, it just says, well, it just says, well, there is no mitigation proposed regarding these effects on the future ability to develop these lands. Just statements like that. So in some places, they may even attempt to mitigate. I lost my screen. Let me continue on here. The dispute resolution process, which Mike was also very concerned about, we didn't really talk about that. And that there really there's a community outreach and communication plan, but there really is no teeth to that. If a resident really does have a dispute and follows through, you know, through this process, and there's still a disagreement, well, that's just too bad. There's nothing they can really do about it at that point, because there really is no definitive end to the resolution process. I'm not sure if Mike wants to say anything more about that, because you looked at that more.
Now, I want to hear Michael's.
But that's my
Concern.
concern.
Do you have another concern?
I have concerns.
This last sentence here.
Yeah, we will properly undertake such measures as commercially reasonable to mitigate the problematic effects, which means, you know, they're, you know, whatever they want to do.
What's that last sentence to?
This is from the wind farm good neighbor agreement.
Good neighbor, this is the agreement, but.
That's not our business.
Yeah, no, it's not, but I think there's,
It is our business in one sense, in that it talks about mitigation and how they want to deal with it.
yeah.
That's
But-
between two parties.
But in the outreach plan, there really is.
We're talking about the
Yeah.
environmental impact statement.
Yeah. And the communication plan and resolution plan is referenced in.
Communication plan.
Yeah. And I think they may have called it different things in here, but.
This, they only call it this.
Okay,
This came from the
communication plan.
draft environmental impact statement. Appendix U, it's been the same, it's been there ever since, and it's the only thing that they refer to as being their method of solving problems.
Dispute resolution process and communication plan.
They call it the Community Outreach and Communication Plan. They don't call it a dispute resolution
Oh.
process.
So say that again?
Community outreach and
Communication plan.
communication plan.
There really is no teeth to this thing.
right.
If someone really does have a legitimate concern that is raised, there is no teeth to this to get this resolved.
Okay.
Using this. That's
Well,
all I'm concerned.
would you look at a plan with more teeth?
Yeah, like third-party arbitrator, that would be
Oh,
agreeable.
you want
something
some.
like that. That takes it out of both the person who raises the concern and Black Oaks, and gives that power to a third-party arbitrator to more fairly navigate that dispute based on the evidence that's provided.
Right, but then after it's navigated, you have to have some.
Has to be binding.
Yes, well, you
Yes.
have to have something that's gonna happen or not happen as
Yes.
a result of it.
Yes, yes, so there has to be some framework for having some kind of binding arbitration process. And I don't really, this doesn't really.
Okay,
this
okay, I
doesn't
got that.
mean anything,
I
so-
got your concern.
I'm not done yet.
All right, you're not done on that concern. Let me go back. Community outreach and
And communication plan,
communication.
yeah. That, there also, one of the things that I mentioned in my submission in the public comment period was a safety issue, a health and safety issue regarding ice throw and other mitigation, where the Black Oak basically drew a circle of 994 feet around each turbine and says that's the safety zone, based on GE recommended the manufacturer standards, which actually is low. It's actually should be much higher than
So
that,
ice
but,
throw is a concern.
ice
You
throw
have.
and safety, so they drew a circle around that.
Well,
But
what's
those-
the
but those-
difference?
But those circles, well, let me finish. Those circles overlap non-participating members' properties. And that basically, so they're drawing a safety line around that, and they're using non-participating residents' properties to mitigate a health and safety effect. These are property owners that have not signed a lease or signed the neighbor agreement. So to me, that's not really mitigating something by taking land use away from non-participating members.
What do you think we can do about that? I mean, that's a setback from property line issue. It's in the law. I'm not sure how we can correct that.
How
Well,
many issues of deaths, injuries, damages from ice throws have you found online?
there have been a few incidences of houses being hit, but it's also one of safety is modeling. There are models out there that clearly show the potential for ice throw.
Yeah,
in cold
I will
climates,
tell you, I've looked
and-
internationally and
and-
nationally, and I haven't yet found a fatality or
Right.
significant damage.
Well,
I've seen pictures of them throwing ice.
I can imagine, like if you're going to design before the space age, designing, space shuttles and designing capsules that, I could say naysayers, well, there's never been an accident of course not.
Of course
because-
not.
Of course not. But they have to model them. They have to model the potential negative effects. The science has to be there, and you can't ignore the science.
See, I just don't feel you can prevent everything. You know, everything has a risk. You get in your car, you have a risk. Walk down the road, on the side of the road, you have a bigger risk. I'm not saying
Yeah.
you're not right in saying that, I'm just saying, having
True.
looked into ice throws, I just don't find that as a potential big hazard. I mean, there just hasn't been evidence of it happening unless I've missed a website.
True, but there's a safety zone for a reason.
Right.
And they're basically taking away potential land use to mitigate that health and safety event.
With the
With the
non-participating.
non-participating members.
The setback's only
and-
200 feet from a non-participating
Yeah,
property line.
and I do have a big concern about that, because you're essentially stealing property use away from non-participating members, property owners. That is a huge concern.
Of yours.
Yes.
Other concerns?
I'm sure I can come up with more, but I'll let Henry.
Well, on to you, Henry.
Well, I agree with, with Mike Carpenter that when the turbines go up and people who live near them are susceptible to the infrasound, or for whatever reason, they decide they can't stay there anymore. I mean, it's unfortunate they'd have to move, but I certainly don't think they should be in a situation where they need to move and they can't afford to because they can't sell their home. So, my suggestion was for Black Oak to compensate them for the difference between the appraised value of their homes prior to the turbines and the maximum price they can get when they're forced to sell. And Black Oak says that, infrasound isn't a problem, people won't get sick, and property values won't be affected, so they really shouldn't have a problem going along with that proposal, I wouldn't think, if they believe what
Well,
they're saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, terrible. I tend to agree with the principle of that you have 100% county assessment on your property. We all do. At least that's what I'm told. So you can't sell for 100% of your assessed value. I don't want to hear about a real estate agent. I don't want to hear about any brokers. I'm talking about the 100% of your assessed value. If you can't sell for at least that, then, maybe we need to, or they need to consider some compensation. Say, as I illustrated before, 100,000, they can only sell for 80. So, Black Oak kicks in 20. And I don't know if that's fiscally possible with their business plan. I have no idea. One person indicated that would kill a project. So I just stopped that discussion because I'm not interested in killing a project. But I also think that there's something to be said for looking at that. And I don't know what properties sold during the time that I remember when there were people actively talking to the planning board, yelling and screaming, or yelling at least, that they would lose their shirts, and yet they are not on the scene anymore. So I'd like to see what those properties sold for. Now, granted, there are no turbines there, but they were terrified that they could not sell their properties.
It's interesting. Way back a long time ago, the original developer actually proposed that as an idea. What Henry suggested.
Yes, he did.
That's not, obviously, it's not legally binding now,
No,
or not in
no,
effect
he
now,
did.
but he did propose
He
that.
stepped out of the whole picture, he just supports the project.
Yeah, so.
I
something
just
that
wouldn't
they-
want, yeah, I wouldn't want to see anybody just trapped for financial reasons in an unhealthy situation where they.
No, if they felt they
couldn't
could
leave.
not live with one of those around them, and it just was, making their life miserable, I would not want that.
And then,
Even though-
there was a distance, how far from a turbine would that apply? So, I suggested maybe 3,000 feet 1,000 meters is a little over 1,000 feet, or 3,000
But you
feet.
see, then
so
the project would go down the tubes, because they couldn't do that.
They couldn't do what?
They couldn't have the project if you're suggesting that different,
No. The
maybe. I-
The distance for
The-
qualified,
qualified homeowners.
Oh, okay.
to be
Okay, gotcha.
reimbursed.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So, you know, it wouldn't be like anybody in the town of Enfield, so I don't like these turbines, I'm gonna sell them, so.
Okay.
You have to be.
But I still wonder if, given the plan, I mean, they've reduced the number of turbines from their original plan down to 7, correct?
Mhm.
So we're saying that anyone within a certain number of feet, if they found they couldn't exist happily in that situation, then they would look at some kind of mitigation from Black Oak financially.
Yeah.
3,000 feet from a turbine?
I
Mhm.
mean, that would say to me 3,000 feet from a turbine. I'd have to look at their plat or their plan, because wouldn't that then cut down the number of turbines?
No.
No, okay.
No, he's just saying people would qualify for that real estate, in terms of buyouts, would be within that 300, that 300. that
3,000
I don't wanna
foot
use the term
distance.
real estate. I wanna use the term assessed value. I don't want any real estate people mentioned, or the word mentioned.
Property or whatever.
Property value, that's
It
fine.
doesn't,
Just
it doesn't
property,
change
just-
the parameters.
I know it doesn't,
Yeah.
I know it doesn't
Just-
change
just
it, but,
language.
It doesn't change the parameters of the wind installation at all.
no, okay, all right,
That's what Henry's saying.
all right, that's fine.
The other
Other
thing.
concern you have? Other
Yeah,
concerns you have?
Yeah, I was a little confused at one of our last meetings when Marguerite was talking about the decommission fund and bonds. And she gave me the impression that once these bonds are established, that they're there for the duration, but somebody else said, no, they had to be renewed, and they may not be renewed. And somebody can choose not to renew them, so I was a little confused about the stability of the decommission fund, that would always be there.
Well, I concur with not quite understanding this. But I have done a tiny bit of research. The bond itself doesn't end every year. It continues rolling over and being viable as long as it is paid for annually. 30 days before the next annual payment would be due, if the bond provider hasn't been paid for the upcoming year, the town would receive notification from the bonding company of the non-payment, and the town would then exercise the bond and be paid by it because it was canceled 30 days later for non-payment. So if the premium wasn't paid and the insurance lapsed, we would claim on the insurance, or the bond.
We would
I
have 30
shouldn't say.
days to do that.
Yeah.
And the
I
other,
have not had a legal opinion on that.
Well, there were a number of issues that we brought up in relation to
Yeah.
the decommissioning fund, right?
I
They were
thought,
gonna
I
be-
thought it was, what I heard was that you were concerned that they wouldn't have the money to renew it.
Well, I thought there were quite a few other issues that we brought up too.
There was. I think it was-
Repeat them for me.
I can't remember exactly, but I remember there was a timing issue that, and it ran
Timing
the 30
issue.
days, but I suggested a longer period of time for us to react to that.
And what was the amount of money that was per generator? 125,000?
125,000.
Times 7, which was like 700.
850.
So
Yeah,
if the usable life of a wind generator is 30 years, how much will that $125,000 be worth 30 years from now when it's time to actually take them down? And
Oh,
somebody could
you're
just
concerned about
walk
the
away.
devaluation of the dollar.
Well, it does.
That's
I mean,
true.
inflation goes up every year. It hasn't ever failed to go up every year. So it may be in 30 years that that's actually worth $25,000 and it won't be enough money to take them down with. So that would be something we'd want to consider in the decommissioning fund, I would think.
So, unlikely that they last 30 years.
However long they last, yeah.
Yeah.
But, and inflation's not so bad right now, but it's been bad.
Yeah, the, I
25.
initially had concern about about the mechanism for securing that bond that they had. I forget what they called it, but
Right.
versus actual money in the bank. That initially they'd have a guarantor of that money, that bank.
I think it wasn't really clear. was
Yeah,
all. That was the main
and so I
thing.
think it was more Black Oak concern, because it's more expensive to guarantee that than it was just to put the money. you
The
know,
bond is
in-
more
in the fund.
expensive than the guarantee, yeah.
Or, yeah, one of
The bond is more expensive than the guarantee.
So what's the
security-
concern?
It wasn't really a concern, it was just a question of what the mechanism of that bonding was going to be. And it really had no difference for us that we'd be guaranteed that money either way. It's just one mechanism was more expensive than the other for Black Oak.
Bonding is more expensive to Black Oak than somebody that
That's what she
guarantees the money.
said.
Yeah, I was, wondering about the risk of whatever that mechanism of that bonding would be, making sure that.
Well,
it
I
would be
understood the
available.
risk was that they wouldn't pay the premium.
If it's a bond.
That's your concern.
If it's a bond, but they didn't want to do a bond. They wanted to eliminate the bond within the first few years. As soon as they had money that was actual money,
Right, right.
they wanted to put that money into
Right.
an account that said, okay, here's guaranteed money. Now that money doesn't cost them any money.
Right.
If they have some
Right.
extra money, they
Right.
have
Doesn't
$1
sense
million.
tell you.
So, but what's your concern that they change in
The-
midstream?
The biggest issue, I think, with any kind of an agreement like that is to see that it really has substance to it, to see that it has teeth in it, to see that it's gonna last, to see that it's going to.
So what I just read you wouldn't do that for you?
The bond part,
Yeah, the bond part.
it's a start, but it isn't all of it. It's got a long ways to go from there. I mean,
What else guarantee would you want?
Some kind of a legal guarantee. It's the same with if there's a problem with one of the wind farms. What do we do if the sound levels go above the sound level that's in our wind law? Let's say the sound level is consistently 65 decibels, A-rated decibels. What do we do? There is nothing at all that the town can do. We don't have any recourse. The people don't have any recourse, the town doesn't have any recourse. Somebody could sue them in civil court and say, you said you wouldn't do this, and so forth and so on. But we don't have any way to stop them, really. The wind law is so toothless, basically, that we really can't stop them. And we really don't even know if it is above 65 decibels, because in order to find out, we have to go out and do the testing. We have to hire somebody and to go out and do the testing.
Well,
on
we've
site.
already hired them.
No, this is after it's done. After it's done, they're not
Yeah.
paying for it
You
anymore.
go
We're
back
paying
to-
for it.
You go.
We pay for it once it's
Yeah.
done. So
Yeah.
that means
Yeah.
anytime there's a
But we've
problem.
already done that. Go back and read your minutes.
No, we haven't done it,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
with turbines that are actually running.
We've hired the
We
monitor.
only hired people to do theoretical simulations of what the sound's gonna be. We don't know what it's really gonna be. The guy from GE said, we can't give you that information. It's proprietary. We won't tell you how loud these generators are gonna be. That's what he told us on Skype that day. I don't even know how Black Oak knows what the sound level is gonna be, because GE says we don't give that out to people.
It's unlikely to be 60 dBA above ambient, but
Well-
that's almost a guarantee.
So you don't think we hired a monitor?
No, we don't have any way, there's nothing in any of their information that says that once the wind generators are up in place, that anyone will be paying attention to the sound levels. They only will pay attention to the bat and bird kills, and Cornell's been hired to do that. There's nothing that says we will pay attention, nobody will be paying attention to the sound levels. It's not in there.
Well, I'll
It's just one of the,
look back through the minutes of the board meetings list.
I'd say, our wind law is really defective. It's almost like not having a law in place. There's a few things like the bonding, which is good. So there's a few parts in there that are good, but by and large, it's really a defective law.
It says that people have to
We
do.
have the law.
We have the law, but it's defective. It's almost meaningless.
It doesn't have penalties.
Yeah.
It says you gotta do it. It doesn't say what you do if they don't do it. That's the problem. It just says you gotta do it. So, sorry, we didn't do it. Fine for Marguerite and Peter, but when that big company from Iberdrola, Spain comes in and says, we own these wind towers and we're gonna do whatever we wanna do, and you don't have any legal rights because your law doesn't say anything about this, what do? We sit here and say, oh, gee, we're stuck. I don't want that to happen to us. That's,
Well, I think you're characterizing it.
oh, have you looked at what NYSEG's been doing lately? With the company that owns them now, the Spanish company that owns them?
They're under the regulation of the
Iberdrola.
state commission.
There are some regulations that apply to them, and then there are some that do not. I deal with them monthly and putting in services to people's houses, and they're very different than they used to be, than when they were owned by United States companies. These people are in it to make money, and that's all they want to do is make money.
They charged me $2,800 to take a pole out of my yard that I didn't want there anymore.
Yeah,
I said, just take the wire off, I'll take care of the pole. No, you can't touch that pole, that's our pole.
yeah.
Well,
That's the
you
kind of
ought to
thing.
meet with me, and I would give you some tips on how to negotiate that in your
It's
favor.
too late, I already paid them.
CC. Oh, CC. I mean,
I see.
So the other concern that somebody brought up, and I was a little confused about, was the turbine sites that are listed as abandoned.
sites.
You want to know where turbines were moved to a new site, and the old one was, well, at least one was listed as abandoned, I think.
So you're talking about
you mean ones
an
that are-
old plan and the supplemental plan?
There's the
Yes.
approved plan and the
Okay.
supplemental plan.
You'll
There's no
agree with the
turbines up.
approved plan and the supplemental
Yeah.
plan?
And you
Okay.
know, Black Oak has been very clear that they already have an approved environmental impact statement.
Yeah, Yeah,
So
they
they've been
do.
very clear, and this gets back to kind of things that Mike was saying is that, well, you know, if the supplemental doesn't work, then we still have the final approved one and the other one to go with.
They made it very clear
They made it
that
very
if
clear,
we don't
yeah.
approve the supplemental, that they will just go back to the original locations.
Yeah, so my question is,
Which is
You're con-
questionable, but
Sir.
whether they can.
yeah, I mean, if we did approve the new plan, then I think we need something that clearly states that the old sites are no longer valid, the ones that were approved previously, so they
Right,
can't put up more than 7
they go off,
turbines.
they go off the table.
Yeah, I don't know if that's clearly written anywhere,
but
but,
It could be, I mean.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think
but I
I think
agree.
it should be, just so that
Yeah,
there
just
can't be
so
more than
that's- it's
7
like-
of them
it's
built.
like, you know, we have a new, I mean, that old plan is off the table in terms of turbine sightings, I agree with that.
That wasn't
certainly.
consistent with what they've told me.
Oh.
what?
That wasn't consistent with what I've been told.
I mean, they
What?
still had those sites open?
No, I'm saying that.
What's
that-
inconsistent?
That, you know, if the supplemental doesn't work, they still have the already approved final
And
plan.
what, and what's your not understanding of that?
I'm just saying that if the supplemental is not approved, they still have the final.
I would agree with that.
Approved one, yeah, it's.
I would agree with that.
And they've been cleared to mention that.
I just don't want them to have
Oh,
both.
I had never thought they had mentioned that.
Yeah, they have.
Oh.
Yeah. and
Oh,
So,
yeah, and?
To me, when it comes to, I think there's things that I don't think would be that expensive to have a dispute resolution in process, and other things, mitigation, but I don't know how serious they are if they say, well, you know, we can always go back to the other one if this one doesn't work out. I
But they
don't
still have
know.
to get a permit.
Yeah.
And then I had an interesting talk with a neighbor who he worked for a wind turbine company, and apparently they had a clause that said they could keep repair parts on the site where the turbines were, and they had a turbine that lost a blade, and it just sat there dead with one blade missing, and they said, well, yeah, those are spare parts. We have a right to keep spare parts here, and they're on that windmill, and so they just left a turbine out of
Just standing
commission.
there unoperational.
Yeah, because, just kind of a little loophole there.
But
That,
that's interesting.
And you don't think that the decommissioning thing would kick in?
I think it does.
I think the
I
decommissioning
think-
does
I think
kick
it-
in.
yeah,
it's
I
clear
think
in
it
that
would,
case.
unless there's a way that they could say, I haven't read anything about their right to store parts up on Black Oak, on the hill there. But if there's something that says we can store parts there, and then they can say, well, that's where we're storing the parts on that turbine, so, I mean.
But I thought that the decommissioning had to do with the blade turning around.
Yep, well, there'd be a little conflict there. They say, yeah, that turbine's not working, but we're not gonna decommission it because
But there's
those
a
are spare
time
parts.
limit in the draft I read.
Yeah, it's just something
It's in
that
the
it
law.
was brought up to me that didn't even
And
occur
it's
to
in
me.
the
Where
law.
was this, Henry? I'd be interested in reading, because that's interesting. That you could just
I'll
leave
ask
a-
him. It was in New York somewhere.
Okay,
I'll
I'd
ask
really
him
be
where it
interested,
was.
because
Yeah.
I keep watching on Bostic Road, the turbine that's up there, it's a private house, it's a
Mhm. Yeah,
Cornell
right near
one.
my place, yeah.
It's a one they're doing experiments or whatever's with, and they've moved it around several times,
They have?
different positions. It's not a
It's not like
commercial.
this, no.
What?
It's not like this.
Oh, no, but I'm just saying that if you have a turbine sitting there,
They
that's.
moved the footprint?
Yeah, they've done it twice,
Really? I didn't notice that.
yeah.
Huh.
Over the last year, yeah, they have. But that's neither
Didn't
here nor
notice, huh?
there.
No.
The neighbors didn't notice.
Oh, I did.
No, it's-
But anyway, I'm more interested in knowing
There's another neighbor here.
if there's a dead turbine, i.e.
Did you
it's not
notice?
working.
She didn't
Does that
notice.
kick into the decommissioning, or does that kick into their maintenance and so on? You know,
Yeah.
I don't really know anything about their maintenance plan.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything
There's
that,
no involved can of worms.
that says they can store parts up there. I don't know if they can store repair parts up there.
Well, yeah, but it seems to me that the crux of your concern is whether you can order decommissioning or not. And I haven't read the decommissioning thing in two weeks, the proposed draft, but I thought it had all to do with the blade turning around and a period of time.
Mhm. Yeah, if it's not working, it's gotta be, then for a year, it has to be decommissioned, taken, torn down, right, isn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I read.
Mm-hmm.
So if one throws a blade or stops working,
And it was nothing about parts being stored.
No.
That
Right.
had nothing to do with the
No.
agreement.
Right. It was just a way for this company to leave that dead turbine standing because apparently they
they're gonna use it as a parts machine.
Right, they had a clause that said they could store parts there,
God.
and so they said that's
Leave our dead
part
car up
storage.
there and-
So,
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's not funny, but, I could see, we'll just leave
So-
it there and take the nuts and bolts off we need.
So tell me again, if we approve the supplemental EIS, what was your concern? The concern before?
With the old site that was approved, would they still be able to put turbines there? And-
Oh, that's your concern.
Right.
Can I read a part of our law? I forget which section this is. It's page 19, part the inoperative wind turbine. If any WTG or wind energy facility remains non-functional or inoperative for any continuous period of 12 months, the said WTG or wind energy facility shall be removed, decommissioned, and the site restored. So that makes it pretty clear to me.
Yeah, that's
Seems to
very
me.
clear.
Yeah.
The site be stored?
Restored.
Oh,
Restored.
restored.
Does it say they can put a new turbine back in? Doesn't really, or they can, that's interesting to note, if a turbine became totally inoperable and unrepairable, could they take everything out, but, perhaps restore or put a new turbine there to replace the old one that went kaput?
That's a good question, what if they replaced it with a different model, like a newer model?
Yeah, that would be a good question to ask.
Yeah.
You would have
Because
to,
economically,
Not sure
say it's
about
say it's a viable wind farm, it's running, one goes kaput, they can't repair it, or it's not economically feasible, so they remove it, but they replace it with a new one, as you say, probably with the new technology, what happens then?
It would be whether it triggers an EIS or
Pardon me?
the seeker process.
Well,
That's what
probably,
I would
yeah.
say off the
If-
top of
if
my
you-
head.
If you tear down a building and rebuild it, you still have to get a permit for the
Permit.
building. There was a building already there, you can't say, well, there was a building already there, so I don't need a permit.
Yeah.
You still need a permit to,
No, so
to build a new
that's
building.
kind of a loophole or a place
Yeah.
that needs to be addressed. Because
Yeah.
if they're running a business operation, they're not gonna wanna leave it vacant. They wanna come back to us or come back to whatever they have to do to put in something that will replace the one that is kaput, if they can't repair it.
Right, and if it's a different model, for example, if you tear down a 100-unit apartment building and you want to build a 125-unit apartment building.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it still will trigger, you know.
Oh, it'll trigger.
Trigger a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I think the same thing in this case, at least it should
So
be.
it's an interesting
Yeah.
conundrum, but it's a good question. There's no doubt it would trigger a permit process and seeker. Because the technology changes
Yeah.
so rapidly.
Okay, so, any other subject matter concerns?
Any others? Hundreds, but I think you got the main ones.
Okay.
Key ones.
Do you mind if I share these with our technical advisor, Kathy Spencer?
Not at all.
Certainly don't mind if you share them. Anything that I've said is in the information that I've already sent her, pretty much. And I think everything that Michael talked about is,
Part of it, maybe not all of it.
yeah, but from reading all of those submittals that were made, there's a lot of stuff in those submittals. And it's pretty definitive in terms of what people have said. But certainly it's not a problem to share.
Okay. Labella is checking this week to make sure that they have received all of the comments during this period. The public hearing transcript is supposed to be ready early this week. They haven't called me as of 3 o'clock this afternoon to say it was done, so I guess it's midweek now that that'll be done. And
It'll be, Labella will be getting it out? Is that?
no. I probably haven't actually shared this, but we are paying for a legal stenographer to transcribe that
Right.
according to legal format,
Right.
which I'm not totally familiar with the legal way of transcribing a public hearing. And I just gave the stenographer the stick for the second public hearing yesterday. That's not nearly as long as the first public hearing, but I'll check with her at the end of the week on what she thinks the turnaround time will
And then
be.
that'll be online?
That's, I'll have to find out what our attorneys say.
One thing, looking up at the seeker handbook, supposedly, you know, we have 45 days to create a final EIS, from my understanding. Does the timing become an issue?
Well, I think along with all the other seeker deadlines, I think we can extend it with cause.
That one we can, but just something to throw out there in case
Yeah.
we need to.
Yeah.
45 days to compile the final and act on it?
Not for the findings, there's, let me have to look it up.
And what's the start date?
The end of the public comment period.
I'll give it a moment here.
have those papers with me. Have you got that timeline?
Let's see, the secret hearing, prepare FEIS, no secret hearing, prepare FEIS. If there was a secret hearing, 45 days after close of hearing. And the close of hearing was,
Close of comment period or close of public hearing?
close of hearing.
Well, Kathy will know that, or Frank will know
Yeah,
that
so
off the top
something-
of their head. but
Something to check on in case we do need to extend that.
I've never heard 45 days.
I may be reading that wrong,
Uh,
but something to check on.
Sure. There's a sign.
Might be in your stomach.
So are we at a place where we want to talk about how we're going to interface with Lavella and with Kathy?
We're going to, there are two ways to do this, face-to-face and by internet and telephone. So of those two ways, do you have a number of face-to-faces you want?
I would think it's going to be somewhat dependent on Black Oak's response. And that we would have to know what they were, I mean, that's what I was wondering about this 45-day thing. I mean, if Black Oak doesn't respond for 42 days, I mean, we have 3 days to respond back.
There's in one of the questions and answer parts, it says, is there any secret time frame that a lead agency can extend without the agreement of the applicant? And the answer to that was, yes, the time period for the preparation of a final EIS can be extended by the lead agency if it concludes that additional time is needed to adequately prepare the statement, or if it has identified problems with the proposed action that require material consideration or modification.
Doesn't say how long it can be
It
extended.
doesn't say,
for.
so, you know, whatever
So
time
where'd we
frame
get
is
the
needed.
45 days?
That they had a table above that set the timeframes, and references to the citation for that. And it just has, it's basically in chronological order of the steps, and if there was and there's two timeframes. One, if there was no secret hearing, you have 60 days after filing of DEIS. If there was a secret hearing, you have 45 days after close of hearing.
So by the close of hearing would be that night when it
Well,
closed?
we don't know what that
Well,
is.
that doesn't say end of public comment period, it just says end of hearing, which was.
All right.
in-
But it's also saying that we can adjust the time period, which
Yes.
usually the criteria, Henry, is to be reasonable. It's just something that's justifiably reasonable, that they're pretty,
Yeah.
that's what they say, you know, I mean, you're not supposed to go 9 months and not have any meetings and they just want you to be reasonable.
Yeah. I assume we'd probably be reasonable.
We would probably want to keep it going as quick as we could, I would think, yeah.
Yeah.
Keep it moving along.
I hope so.
So the hearing was on April 12th, so 45 days after that would be the.
Why don't I just
Yeah.
get the answer from, I can't get it till 1 o'clock tomorrow, but.
That's fine.
Meanwhile, we're going to speak with Kathy at next week's meeting.
I think that would be helpful,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was what you wished earlier. And then what about 2 weeks after our next board meeting for a face-to-face working session with Kathy?
Well, we have to have a response first.
From
If we don't have a
Black Oak.
response, we have nothing to deal with, right?
Oh, you don't want to set that meeting until after you get a response?
Well, we can set it now, but if we don't have a response, then
We
I don't
wanna
know.
tie her up. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
a kind of meeting to, not meeting to meet, never mind.
We could talk about
Unless there's
the
a-
one side, but we can't really talk about, we can't respond yet, because we don't have,
Okay, so,
We'll probably know next week after talking with Kathy.
maybe she's already gotten it back, although I wouldn't think so. I would
she's
think
not
it's-
gotten it back.
I would think that's gonna take them a while to come up with
Okay.
a response, maybe not.
So we'll probably end up extending it regardless. We don't have the time to do it.
Neither person has told me that there's an imposed time from the state secret
Well, I think when you
process.
find out that, may click into what we have to do with Kathy and otherwise, but I don't see any point in having a meeting where we can't either talk to her face-to-face or through Skype.
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't,
We could talk about how we wanna proceed, though, after we get the responses.
if we get those responses, yeah.
Well, we will get them from Black Oak eventually, right?
Yes.
Hope
Yeah,
so.
it says in the secret handbook that that generally the timeframes aren't mandatory, they're recommended, but they still, there's legal implications for not following those timeframes, and some of them, like, you do want to work with the project sponsor to if there are extensions needed for those timeframes.
And if I stepped
Yeah.
into their shoes, I would wanna keep moving, no matter what,
Right.
rather than digging my heels
Yes.
in and not doing anything.
So maybe we could talk tonight about how we want to go about the process of working with Lavella
Mhm.
as a board. And decide that.
Well, give me 5 ways, possibilities, 5 possibilities.
have-
Because I can only think about talking face to face.
Okay.
And
One-
talk-
One
two.
would be that we would have meetings when we would take Black Oak responses, and we would all, 5 of us, talk about the responses and what we felt about them, and deal with each one individually, and come up with our own individual take on it. Write down that take, give that to Labella, and say, here's what we think about Black Oak's responses. Second one would be, we could have Kathy attend all those meetings, and ask her to come to every time we do a working meeting, and have her be a part of that process as well. Another is, we could assign a working group from the board to do responses, like we assigned the WIN committee. They could have either the working group from the board, or it could be a working group from the board in conjunction with a number of people from the committee itself, or from outside the committee, that would then go ahead and respond to those responses from Black Oak. Bring those back to the board at some point and say, here's what we came up with, and then the board could discuss them as a whole, which wouldn't be quite so many meetings of the board. A fourth way we could just assign Michael over here to respond to every one of Black Oak's responses, bring that to, did he say yes, he
I
wanted
like
to
all
do
them
that?
except option 4.
And say, okay, Michael's gonna bring the answers to that, or any one of us, to say, any one of us will do that job and bring the answer to it. Fifth would be, we could just say, Labella, you give us all your responses ahead of time, we'll look at them, and then we'll make responses to your responses, to Black Oak's responses, to the people's responses, to Black Oak's original submittal, and do it that
Yeah, I
way.
totally get what you're saying, it's just like, oh.
So there are different ways we could do it,
Maybe we can ask Kathy next week, what's the best way?
That's what I was
that-
thinking.
that-
We should
that-
ask
that-
Kathy, yeah.
Is there an efficient way that we can get what we need without, bogging them down
Yeah.
too much either? So maybe there's some way we can.
If we ask
figure that
Kathy,
out.
then we can talk and decide
Yeah.
what we think is the best choice.
Okay.
Yeah, I think some of them, like, the responses would be like, some of them have, substantive issues that need to be resolved, or not resolved, but at least be responded to. And other ones are more, like, okay, duly noted. People that say, I fully support this, or,
There's
that-
a lot of
that's really-
positive ones,
it's really
too.
not- Yeah, a lot of positive ones, like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, duly noted.
Yeah.
But it's nothing to really respond to. And
Well,
other ones there are.
I would really like you to think about clumping similar comments together. Responding to each comment seems burdensome to
And
me.
I think that was implicit in what they were asking for originally, was to try and keep repetition to a minimum, basically.
Right.
And obviously, people that didn't know other people were writing about something can't do that because they have to write their own thing. I would assume that Black Oak would do that to some degree, would put a group
I
of
believe they do.
similar types of things. So maybe it'll come to us that way, and if it is, that'll make it much easier. If not, though, we could certainly do it ourselves and say, here's the 6 categories that
Yeah,
we want to deal with.
that's what I'm thinking is-
But it's not
Exactly.
really Black Oak's responsibility to do that, that's, we're responsible for the final.
It isn't, but I'm
passing.
thinking that in their response, they may do that.
I believe they clump similar
They did,
subjects
they
together.
did in the FEIS, the original FEIS, yeah. They did clump together
Yeah.
some things, so.
Okay, so at next week's board meeting, we'll decide the next working meeting.
Sounds good.
If you have things you want on this month's agenda, email me.
I have the emails. I have a couple of them, so that's my-
Any
You're
other,
gonna have that from Peter.
Yes. Could you pass that to Mike too? That's my email to
Oh.
get things for sure. I mean, I go on I have my Enfield stuff, but my Gmail
We'll
is
have multiple
something is
emails.
going on with something.
Okay.
okay, well, here's some help for you. Comment, this is the process. Comments that are substantive and relevant to the supplemental DEIS are separated from comments that provide opinion and guidance to town board in making a decision. And those will be separated out.
That's good. Is that from, what's that from?
That's from Frank.
Okay.
Frank Davia?
Yeah, substantive comments are categorized and grouped by topic. Based on the number of comments received, it is likely that the responses in the supplemental final EIS will be provided by topic groups rather than providing a response for each individual letter or verbal statement. A table will be provided in the supplemental final to allow persons to easily locate the responses to the substantive comments they made.
So we,
And DEC defines substantive in the seeker handbook.
so we need to make sure that when we group those together, that it really represents the body of the comments.
Right, a substantive piece, like you set up a folder for each substantive
You know,
item.
A lot,
I don't know,
A lot of
that's from
folks would-
Kathy.
a lot of folks were very detailed and nuanced in their responses, and I just don't want some of those detailed nuances just to get lost as we group like responses together.
I think it's gonna be complicated.
It is gonna be complicated.
Yeah, I think that
So we have
advice,
to be careful to make sure that read some of those really carefully and make sure that some of the finer points aren't lost.
yeah, you
the finer
might pull them
concerns,
out and
yeah.
put them in another folder. or
Well, I think you
file.
really do have to be mindful of the professional aspect to this and what professionals who prepare these statements feel is substantive and what are nuances. I mean, that allegedly is one of the reasons we hire professionals, is because most board members do not have this kind of expertise.
We can still look at the original submissions and make sure that what is said is still representative in that body. I mean, since we're ultimately responsible for the final EIS, it's our responsibility to make sure that those are incorporated appropriately.
I think there's gonna be some work there.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of work.
Huh? I'm a-
Other things for tonight? I move we adjourn.
Second.
Oh, and also before you, there's been, I should have said this before, I'm sorry. There's been a lot of comment on why were the setbacks changed in the second version of the law. I gave you the resolution that outlines that board's decision on why things were changed.
Yeah, I read that with interest.
You gave that to us previously?
Tonight,
I remember.
Oh, really?
tonight. Quite detailed.
Quite detailed, but they also,
Let's do this.
they also made clear the
that one
fact
too.
that they didn't think that that was the final
I
state.
didn't realize it's,
That what they wrote in the law was not the final say.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They made it clear to say that, we may say that this is
I
the
know
law,
that they have that.
and these are the requirements of the law, but we feel very sure
I
that
thought- I'm
there
pretty
may be
sure I
a,
put it
that'll
there.
come up that'll change these
Right
parts of the
there.
law.
Oh, I had it buried
And
under
it will be
this.
done.
Sorry about that. You're right.
It's okay. Well, I just